Have you ever heard the saying, one of these things just ain't like the other? Well, in this case, we've got the opposite of that. One of these things is just like the other, and they shouldn't be at this case. Stay tuned. Alright everyone, we got a good one here for you today. The operator stating that when he tested the pump in idle, it produces the same pressure on the intake and discharge gauges. And they also claim that when it's in pump mode it works fine, pressures go up and down, the governor's working fine the way it should, but when he idles the pump again and closes the tank suction valve and the tank fill valve, that these gauges spike up to 400 psi in unison together. So the truck just arrived, we're having a quick look over, and one thing I do notice, we got a leak. And when I check out what that is, it's actually Class A foam. So then I started looking, and you can actually see it driven out of the truck. And a little bit closer investigation, you can see it dripping right out of the intake. So basically what that means right now is that this pump is full of foam. Entirely full of foam. So we're going after that first. Stay tuned. Okay, this truck is equipped with a Foam Pro system 2002, and we're leaking foam. So the first thing we're going to do is walk around the truck. And we're going to come in here to our foam controller. And on the very top, there's a valve. We're going to turn that off, and that will shut off our flow of foam. Now we're going to come over to our pump master drain and drain all that foam out of the pump. Anybody want a bubble bath? Okay guys, the way this system works is there's a foam tank in the back there. It goes through the foam unit, which we just saw a second ago where we turned off the foam. And it will come down through a hose, and it gets injected into the discharge manifold right here. This is a one-way check valve, and it allows foam to be injected, but doesn't allow water to come back through. The problem with it is that if this check valve sticks open, foam can come through your tank, and just continuously pass through this discharge. And I suspect that's what's going on here. So I'm going to pull this apart, and we'll have a look and see if this valve is stuck open. So basically, it's not a difficult valve to get out. Let's see if I can show you a picture there. There's your hose from the pump. It just screws into here. We're going to remove that hose, and this will unscrew from the manifold. Okay, so I've removed the nut on that hose, and I just got my thumb over it just to show you. This line is full of foam. So if this check valve has failed and it's open, it'll just continuously allow foam to drain into the pump whenever it's not pressurized. So now we're going to take this out of the discharge. Okay, we've got our valve out. You can see all the crap around there. Pretty clean in here, but the foam will do that. We're just going to check now to see if it's off its seat either bit there. Just going to reach in. It's moving, but it's not smooth. Like I can feel it grabbing on all the dirt and debris on the other side there. So it's possible that this could have stuck momentarily at some point, or could have stuck in the open position for one cycle. We're going to take it apart and clean it and inspect the seal on the inside. Okay, to disassemble this, there's a snap ring on the inside. I'm going to try to do this one-handed. Okay, we've got our snap ring out, and normally, so I've done a bunch of these, this will just pop right out. But in this case, it doesn't want to. So I got to try to do this with one hand. I'm basically going to take a brass drift and very gently tap it out of its bore. Now, forgive me, I'm going to try. So basically, very gently, you don't want to damage anything. And then you have a return spring inside, and right away I see something. That there is part of your O-ring. So I didn't have any O-rings here to rebuild one, but I did have one that I took apart before and put a new seal in. Before I put it in, I always like to check it, so I made this little tool up here. It's nothing special, just a piece of Synflex, some fittings. This takes compressed shop air on this side, and on this side here I just have brass fittings that I'll be able to test the valve this way to make sure it's opening as it should. Nice smooth closing. And then I have another fitting that allows me to turn it around and make sure it's not actually leaking. So we'll just do that there now. Okay, here we have our check valve set up in the little test rig we just showed you, or I just showed you. Basically, air is going to simulate foam now. And what I'm checking for is that the valve does indeed open when pressure is applied and remain open, and that it shuts when the pressure is removed. And that'll just simulate foam being injected and then the injection stopping to make sure the valve closes. So again, I just have a little thumb valve here that I control. I'm going to look in at the plunger, and I'm making sure that the plunger moves all the way ahead. And it closes. And now I'll hook up the valve in reverse, and we'll check to make sure that no air is passing through. Okay, so now we've got our check valve is just turned around basically. We're going to check the other side. This time the air is simulating water pushing against the seat of the valve, and we want it to stay closed. So before we wanted to hear air escape and we wanted to see the seat move. This time we're using the same compressed air. And when I open the valve this time, I don't want to hear anything. And I don't hear anything, so that tells us through sound it's sealing. Now, I always like to just take a little bit of soap. This is just plain old Sunlight soap. And what I'm looking for is any bubbles. I got one, but I think that's just the soap settling. So then the second test, I'm good there. I'll come over here, and I'm going to close my valve like that. Remove the air, and I'll usually let this sit closed for 5 minutes or so just to see. But when I come back, I'll open the valve, and what I want to hear is, because that tells me that this valve stayed closed and held pressure in here. So now I know that this check valve is good to install back into that manifold. And I'll take you back there in 1 second. Okay, so we've installed our check valve back in the truck, and everything's hooked up. I want to show you something. I closed the master drain about 10 minutes ago. That's all I did. But let's look at our pressure gauges. They were at 0. Intake and discharge. They're slowly creeping up. I've been watching them creep up there every few minutes. So what's going on here? We've changed our check valve, but we still have a pump and a tank and plumbing all full of foam that I've agitated. And now our pressure is rising on both sides. And just to confirm, you can see the foam there under the water fill. Let's just remove the screen. Look at that. We have a water tank completely full of foam. Now, you can see what the foam is doing here. It's doing what it's supposed to do. It's turning into foam. This is still ongoing in the pump right now. Everything is closed. Tank suction, tank fill, and discharge are closed. But this foam inside the pump is still expanding. So we saw we had foam in our water. So that's the water's coming from the tank, which is aerated and full of foam. It's coming into our intake. That foam is expanding on the intake side. We've pumped that same foam through our pump, through the impeller, to the discharge side, which is going to be this side. So that foam is expanding there as well. When the pump is shut down, everything will equalize out. So even though it's still building pressure, it's going to build it equally on both sides because everything is full of the same mixture of water foam. So we're going to come down. I'm going to take an intake here. And let's just see what we got. We got 35 psi of expanding foam. So now I'm going to pull on the master drain and we're going to watch those gauges. And they're going to go down in unison. And here's what you see. Massively aerated water and foam that just keeps expanding. It's important to remember one other thing. The initial clue to what was going on with this truck was we saw a puddle of foam on the ground, and then when I looked up, remember I saw it dripping out of here. So that was the initial clue that we were full of foam because I had foam coming out of there. Technically, I shouldn't have been able to see that because technically this should not be leaking. If there's foam coming out of here, it means there's either an issue with the gasket or this isn't tight. So we're going to address that now to make sure there's no vacuum leaks in the pump and it'll be able to draft and obviously hook up the pressure fine. So don't forget that if you ever see stuff dripping out of here on your intakes, this is supposed to be tight and sealed. I got lucky with that one, but make sure to fix it. Hey guys, I'm always thinking about the new technician in mind, so I'm going to try to do a replication on the whiteboard explaining what exactly happened to this particular problem. A couple of points that I realized last night when I was editing the footage. I didn't tell you exactly what happened at the end. The truck was sent out with a team of firefighters to be completely flushed out. So that includes the tank, the pump, the plumbing, everything was flushed over and over again to get rid of all that foam out of there. Because if you don't get the foam out of the pump and the tank and the plumbing, you're more or less going to have the same problem occurring over and over again because you're just recirculating the same foam. You've stopped the leak, basically, of foam into the pump, but it still has a lot of foam into it. So it's very important to flush that out, and that was completed by a team of firefighters after. The other thing was, in the beginning of the video, I touched on that the operator had mentioned that the pressure had spiked to 400 psi. As hard as I tried, I could not duplicate that. I in no way disbelieve the operator. I have an educated guess on what happened, but I could not duplicate it. My theory is that when they were testing their pump, when they went to idle and immediately shut down the tank suction and tank fill, the foam was still very in an agitated state. So at that point it was expanding rapidly. Shutting those valves just after idling the pump probably caused this pressure spike on the gauges. I couldn't get it to happen, but that's my educated guess on it. Okay, you're about to learn that I am in no way an artist. So here we go. We have a tank which is connected via a pipe or a hose. So we're going to call this foam tank. This will be your foam injection unit or the pump, so I'm just going to call it pump. I'll call it foam pump. Then this is going to be your water manifold in your pump. And by pump I mean your water pump in your actual apparatus. We'll just do like a cutaway of a pipe. Okay, so another pipe Let's pick a pretty new color. And at the end of that pipe where it threads into the water manifold, you're going to have your check valve. Some people call this an injector, some people call it a check valve. Essentially all it is a check valve. What happens is, we're going to use red for foam. So when your pump is operating, we use blue for water. When your pump is operating, you have a discharge here full of pressurized water, and it is working against this check valve to keep it closed. The pump's job, when it needs to inject foam, is to send, well, foam will come from the tank into the foam pump, then it gets pressurized, comes down to the check valve. The pressure of this foam has to overcome the pressure of this water. So, I don't know, let's say the water here is at 100 psi. Just pressure of this foam now needs to be over 100. And basically, because this pressure is higher than this pressure, it opens this check valve, injects foam into your stream. And that's how you get foam made. The problem occurs when this check valve here either fails or sticks or something happens to it that allows it to stay even in somewhat of an open position. When this pressure here disappears, so you shut down your pump, so that pressure is now gone. Your pump isn't making any pressure for foam either, but you still have head pressure. So, and possibly a siphon effect. So foam is going to be drawn from the tank and allowed to fall in. This is now empty, so now it's just going to fall into this pipe and fill it and eventually make its way back to the pump. And if this is allowed to continue for a long time, that's where you get the situation like we had yesterday where, I mean, like by a long time, I mean, say if the truck is parked overnight, this is where you get a situation where your foam can actually drain into pump. Okay, what we have here is my attempt to be an artist. I'm not quitting my day job, but let me just draw a line here to separate these two. So we just talked about how foam comes from the foam tank down to a foam line to a foam injection pump. Then from the foam injection pump, it gets pressurized and gets sent through another pipe, delivered to a check valve or injector, and pressure of the foam overcomes pressure of the water. Foam gets injected into the manifold. And I really should have a direction which way that water is moving. So when it gets injected into the water stream, it'll be carried on with whatever way the flow of the water is going. And that's how we get our foam. Here is my attempt at drawing the injector for you, just to give you a little demonstration on what's going on. And I do have an injector here apart that we'll use for demonstration along the way. And depending on, I often call it an injector, I often call it a check valve. I do use the two interchangeably when it comes to this. So I mean the same thing when I say that. So this would be the injector in its closed position. So basically right now, right here we have foam pressure and water pressure. Basically, if your system is inactive, you just have head pressure on it. Basically right now this foam pressure is not able to overcome the water pressure, therefore the plunger stays seated. No foam will enter the water stream. The check valve is pretty simple, and like I said, I don't do it justice with my drawing, but basically you have a piston and a spring that the foam pressure comes in and acts against. So foam would come in. This is actually like a bowl shape, so it would fill this whole area with the spring and would pressurize here. This is where it's deadheaded at the moment. If water pressure is greater than foam pressure, the water is acting on this surface to keep that check valve or injector closed. So for example, if we had again 100 psi of water here acting on that, the bottom of that valve, and I don't know, 20 psi here, just say, I use the wrong color marker, the water pressure is going to keep that against its seat, so no foam is going to enter your water stream. Now, let's just say you're running your pump. Now you need foam. So if your water pressure here is still 100 psi, now the foam injection pump is going to demand the foam pressure to go up, and let's just say it injects it at 150. Just for easy numbers so you understand. Basically now this foam pressure overcomes the water pressure. Foam comes in at the higher pressure. It now acts on the piston, since it is allowed to come in here. So it does that. I don't know if you can see that, but there's perforations in that piston there. So when the seal opens, foam is always in here. Foam always enters the center, and it will come out through the holes once this seal passes the seat. So now at this point, foam has come in. It's already been filling here. Now it's permitted to come out past the seat and be injected into your water stream. These numbers aren't accurate. I'm just using numbers for demonstration. This will actually usually inject this. I had to check, but I'm pretty sure it's somewhere around 400 psi. And that is to make sure that it can overcome this and maintain it. Because as soon as that opens, you're going to have a massive pressure drop here because all your foam is leaving. So it runs at a higher pressure to help maintain that. So now we're injecting foam, all is well. Let's say the Foam Pro controller stops the foam. So now our foam pressure is gone. We still have foam there because it's residual in the line, like I said, head pressure. Let's just say water pressure stayed the same. Hell, let's say it goes to 0, because it will, because this is open. Or pretty close to it. This valve, injector, check valve, should now return to the closed position that we see here. Because water pressure is acting on this surface to drive that back up against its seat. The problem occurs when sometimes you get a lot of gunk and build up in here, and this valve stays open. Now, 9 times out of 10, your water pressure is going to be heavy enough to drive that back closed. That's why you don't usually see a lot of problems with water entering the foam system, because this can generate a lot of pressure, as you know, especially with the volume that is pushing through it. So it'll usually drive that back up no matter what. But sometimes it mightn't seat correctly all the way. Or I've seen it where guys do, technicians do a calibration, that sort of thing, where the pipe is empty. The Foam Pro will activate, push the valve out. Well, there's no water pressure at that point to drive it back up, so then it stays open. And then basically you just get a continuous feed of water from your tank, from your foam tank, into your pump. And then when you run your pump, you take the water out of your pump and you drive it back into your tank. So it's just a continuous cycle over and over. So basically what we had going on here yesterday was pretty much this. This valve did not return to the fully seated position. It came close. It was very close, but it never returned to the fully seated position. So as the truck sat, foam was permitted to just drain gravity pressure, head pressure down here and just continuously trickle into the water manifold. And once so much of that collects, it's gonna drain right back into the pump. And that starts the vicious cycle of circulating water throughout the entire system. Because you're always supposed to be circulating water, no matter what. Otherwise, you get a deadhead situation. So let's call this water tank. That's connected to. There's your tank fill, tank suction. Here's your pump. So basically, the pump draws water from the tank into the pump, pressurizes it, sends it back to the tank because we're recirculating water, right? Always want to keep nice cool water in that pump, keep that impeller from getting hot. So basically, if you have foam here, you draw in fresh water from your tank, you're now mixing it with the foam that's collected into the pump and driving it back to the tank. And that's where you have a vicious cycle. And then as soon as you shut everything down, everything is aerated, the foam is expanding into what we saw in the video. So now we're starting to take up this space here with foam. And it doesn't take long for a 3/8 line to go into your pressure gauges to register that you have an increase in pressure there. So guys, I hope this makes sense. I'm not an artist, and I'm doing my very best to make this make sense to you. If you have any questions at all, leave comments or reach out to me anytime. Hey guys, I just want to say thank you very much for tuning into this video. If you like the content that you see, please like, subscribe, and ring the bell, as the YouTubers say. In order to keep doing what I do, I need support from viewers like you. So your second to like and subscribe to the channel means a lot to me. Also, take a second to check out fattalk.ca. It's a project we're working on, myself and the administrators, to basically make a hub for everything that we do. So you could sort of go to fattalk.ca, get links to our social media, which includes Facebook and Twitter. We also have the Buy Me a Coffee section there for donating to Fat Talk. Any money that I'm collecting through these donations and any of the sales of the swag, that sort of thing, all goes back into this group to purchase better equipment, get some better software licensing for editing, that sort of thing. Everything goes back into it. I don't take anything from it myself. As I mentioned, we have a Fat Talk challenge coin for sale. All that's available on fattalk.ca. There's Fat Talk stickers and a link to the Fat Talk swag store, which is basically t-shirts, hats. We got all kinds of stuff there. So take a second to check it out. I really appreciate the support you guys give me. I will be having a little fundraiser event coming up very soon, because the fat computer that I use to edit all this stuff is pretty much on its last leg, and I don't really have the funds available right now to purchase a computer that will do what I need it to do. And with a full-time job, I'm a father of one right now, about to be a father again in August. I only have night times and early mornings to edit this stuff, and I spend more times fighting with my computer than I do getting productive work done. So I want to keep productive content flowing for you guys, and that's all the fundraiser will be about, just to give me a hand to purchase the equipment I need in order to keep the content flowing. So thank you very much. I appreciate every single one of you. If anybody has any questions at all, you can always reach out to me. Contact information at fattalk.ca. Any questions at all, shoot me an email, shoot me a message. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Thank you again for your support. Have a great day.